The day my own father looked me in the eyes in that courtroom and lied was a day I understood what true betrayal really feels like. Not the kind of betrayal you read about in books, not the kind they make movies about. This was the kind that crawls under your skin, wraps itself around your lungs, and makes it impossible to breathe. Because it came from the one person in the world who was supposed to protect me, my father. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because trust me, you need to understand how beautiful my life looked before it all fell apart. My name is Amara, and for 26 years, I believed I had the most devoted father a daughter could ask for. He was charming, confident, always the loudest laugh in any room. Growing up, everyone in our neighborhood admired him. They called him the good man, and I believed them. I believed him. More than anything in this world, I believed in my father. My mother passed when I was 9, a car accident. Just like that, she was gone. And after that, it was just the two of us, me and Dad against the world. He would say that every night before bed. Me and you, Amara. Me and you against the world. And I held on to those words like they were the only thing keeping me standing. So I worked hard for him, for us. I studied accounting, graduated top of my class, and at 24, I got a position at my father's business, a small but respected import company he had built over 15 years. I was proud. He was proud. Or so I thought. But what I didn't know that day I walked into that office with my brand new ID badge was that I was walking straight into a trap. A trap my father had been building for years, with my name already carved into it. It started small, subtle things I didn't notice at first. Documents he asked me to sign, files he asked me to organize, financial reports he handed me and said, "Just put your name at the bottom, sweetheart. It's just a formality." And I did, because he was my father, because I trusted him completely. I didn't know those documents were fraudulent. I didn't know the numbers had been manipulated. I didn't know that for 2 years, my father had been siphoning money from business partners and investors, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and carefully, systematically placing my name on every single trace of it. I was his escape plan. I was his alibi. I was his scapegoat. And I had no idea. The morning they came for me, I was sitting at my desk with a cup of coffee, going over quarterly reports. 2 officers walked through the front door of the office. They asked for me by name, and then they said words that shattered my entire world in one sentence. "Amara Osei, you are under arrest for financial fraud and embezzlement." The room went silent. Every colleague, every employee, everyone I had worked beside turned to stare at me, and from the doorway of his office, I saw my father, standing there, watching. And he did not move, he did not speak, he did not say a single word. That silence was louder than anything I had ever heard in my life. They took me in handcuffs, in front of everyone I knew. They put me in a cold, gray room that smelled like old coffee and broken hope. And I sat there, shaking, telling myself over and over, "This is a mistake. This is a misunderstanding. My father will fix this. He will come. He always comes." He didn't come. Not that night, not the next morning, not until 3 days later, when my court-appointed lawyer told me that my father had given a statement to investigators, a statement that placed full responsibility for the fraud on me. I remember the exact moment I read those words on that paper. My hands stopped shaking. Everything went completely, terrifyingly still. Because some betrayals are so enormous that your body doesn't know how to react to them. My father told investigators that I had accessed the accounts without his knowledge, that he had noticed irregularities but didn't want to believe his own daughter was capable of such a thing, that he had tried to protect me and that it had cost him everything. He cried in his statement. He actually cried. And people believed him. Of course they did. He was the charming, respected businessman. I was the young woman who had access to the accounts. I had signed the documents. My name was everywhere. The case against me looked airtight. My lawyer told me quietly one afternoon, "Amara, the evidence, it doesn't look good. If your father is testifying against you, a jury might convict you on his word alone." I went home that night to the tiny apartment I could barely afford since the investigation had frozen all company assets, and I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. And for the first time since my mother died, I cried until I had nothing left. Because I had lost everything. My job, my reputation, my freedom was slipping away. And the man who had raised me, who said, "Me and you against the world," had turned the whole world against me instead. But here is what my father forgot, what every person who underestimates someone forgets. Pain, when it reaches a certain point, stops destroying you, and it starts sharpening you. I stopped crying. I dried my face, and I started thinking. I went back through everything, every memory, every file, every conversation I could recall. And slowly, something started to emerge from the fog. A pattern, a thread. There was one man, a former business partner named Mr. Adeyemi, who had abruptly left my father's company 2 years before I joined. No explanation, just gone. I remembered my father's face whenever that name came up, the way his jaw would tighten, the way he would change the subject. I found Mr. Adeyemi through an old business directory. I called him from a payphone, because yes, I was that careful now. And when he picked up, I said simply, "My name is Amara Osei. I think my father destroyed both of us, and I think you might have proof." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And then he said, "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." Mr. Adeyemi had left the company because he had discovered the fraud himself. Early, before it escalated, he had confronted my father. My father had threatened him, forged documents to implicate him in unrelated business disputes, and effectively silenced him with the fear of his own legal exposure. Mr. Adeyemi had run to protect himself, but he had kept everything. Every email, every transfer record, every communication that pointed directly at my father and only my father. He had been waiting for someone brave enough to come forward. He had been waiting for me. The trial began on a gray Tuesday morning in October. The courtroom was packed. News had spread. A daughter accused of defrauding her own father's company. It was the kind of story people love to judge before they know the truth. My father sat on the witness stand in a perfectly pressed suit, silver-haired, dignified, composed. He looked like a man who had been wronged. He looked like a grieving parent forced to testify against his own child. And I watched him from the defendant's table, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Calm. Because I knew what was coming, and he didn't. The prosecutor questioned my father for 40 minutes. He gave his practiced, tearful performance. He spoke about how he had loved me, trusted me, and how I had used that trust to steal from the company he had spent his life building. He dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. A woman in the jury box shook her head in pity. And then my lawyer stood up. She began calmly. She asked my father about specific transactions, ones he claimed he hadn't known about. He answered smoothly. She nodded, and then she placed a document in front of him. "Mr. Osei, could you read the email address on this correspondence for the court?" He looked down. His face didn't change, but his hands tightened. It was an email sent from his personal private account, one he had never disclosed, directly to an offshore account, dated 14 months before I ever set foot in that company, before I had ever touched a single file. My lawyer didn't stop there. One by one, she presented Mr. Adeyemi's evidence, transfer records, internal memos, a voice recording, Mr. Adeyemi had been careful, meticulous, of my father explicitly directing the manipulated account entries and laughing about how no one would ever trace it back to him. The courtroom went from murmuring to absolute silence. And then, my father did something that told me everything I ever needed to know about who he really was. He looked at me. Not with guilt, not with remorse. He looked at me with something cold and calculating, as if he was still trying to figure out how I had outmaneuvered him, as if even in that moment, I was just a problem to be solved. That look broke the last thread of the little girl inside me who had still, somewhere deep down, hoped she was wrong about him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Not guilty. 2 words I had been terrified I would never hear, and when the forewoman spoke them, I didn't cry, I didn't collapse. I just closed my eyes for one moment and breathed. My father was arrested at the courthouse steps, the same courthouse steps where he had walked in expecting me to be convicted. He was charged with financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and perjury. His assets were seized. The company, his life's work, was placed under investigation. I watched them lead him away, and for a long time after that, people asked me, "Amara, do you hate him?" And I always give them the same honest answer. No, I don't hate him. Hate would mean I'm still attached, and I refuse to spend another moment of my life attached to someone who saw me as a tool rather than a daughter. What I feel is something quieter, something sadder. I grieve the father he could have been. I grieve the childhood that was built, at least in part, on a performance. I grieve the version of him I loved, knowing now that version may never have fully existed. But I don't grieve who I am, because everything I went through, the humiliation, the arrest, the trial, the loneliness, it revealed something to me that I might never have found otherwise. I am stronger than I ever knew. And the people who try to use you as their foundation, who build their escape on your back, they always forget one thing. Foundations don't stay silent forever. Eventually, they crack, and everything built on lies comes down. If you're in a moment right now where someone you love has betrayed you, where you feel framed, silenced, or abandoned by the very person who should have protected you, I want you to hear me. The truth is patient. It waits. It doesn't need to rush. And no matter how carefully someone builds their lies around you, if you stay standing, if you stay searching, the truth will find its way into the light. It always does. My name is Amara. I was framed by my father. And the jury got the real story. And so did I.